Hi, it's Imogen, and today I'm going to be covering some things you may not have considered when you travel to Australia. First things first, that's really hard to say. Accommodation. Do not. No, 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 no. And I emphasize this with many lines and exclamation marks. Leave booking your accommodation till last minute, especially if you're going to be staying in a city centre. If you're staying somewhere like Sydney or Melbourne or Brisbane, good hostels are going to book up pretty quickly. So make sure that you have at least, say, the first 4 days of your trip booked well in advance, because the last thing you want is to get off a 24-hour flight and then be like, cool, now I get to go to a hostel that has a 2 out of 5-star rating and I'm gonna get absolutely no sleep. If you are staying in hostels, make sure you choose the right hostel for you. Obviously, cost will play a very big factor in choosing your hostels, but make sure you are choosing the right vibe. I am old and boring and honestly couldn't think of anything worse than going out clubbing with a bunch of 19-year-olds. But some hostels, you will find that really the only activities that they have involve vodka shots and bad decisions. Which, if that is your vibe, great, good for you. Wish I could do it. I need to be in bed by 10 p.m, the latest. If you are booking a hostel because you want somewhere that you can cook food and fall asleep at a reasonable time, make sure that you check out the reviews. Because one, the kitchen might be absolutely horrible and full of bugs and really gross. And two, if you are staying in a party hostel, then there is no chance in hell that you are having an undisturbed night's sleep. But you know what? Sometimes you don't have to stay in hostels. Oh my god, what? If you are traveling with another person, sometimes just getting an Airbnb and splitting the costs is actually cheaper and obviously way nicer than staying in a hostel. Especially if you're willing to take a little bit of time traveling from the Airbnb to maybe a city centre, to the shops, etc. Staying in an Airbnb also means that you might get some nice towels, access to Netflix, and the ability to actually just like switch off when you really don't want to speak to another living human being. Because traveling can be really fucking overwhelming, and sometimes you're like, you know what, I don't want to travel today, I just want to watch reruns. And that's okay. The next thing kind of plays into, are you going to get a hostel or are you going to get an Airbnb? Parking spaces. If you are renting a car and you're traveling in a city, you are probably going to have to pay for a parking space. This could be up to, or sometimes more than, the actual cost of your hostel. When I was looking at hostels in Sydney the second time we went there, and I was looking for places with parking spaces because we'd bought a car for traveling, some of the spaces were $40 per night. That is like the cost of an extra bed. So if you take that into consideration and then you look at the cost of Airbnbs, a lot of them, especially if you go like 30 to 45 minutes outside of a city centre, will have a parking space. Your next question might be, okay, but what the fuck do I pack? Squishmallows, or some form of emotional support, cuddly thing. And obviously you want the basics. You want your passport, you want your medication, visas, clothes, plenty of underwear, some trainers, some walking boots. But have you considered a microfiber travel towel? These are great for when you first start traveling because they're super tiny and they can fit into your bag super easily. They also dry really quickly, so you're not making anything else wet in your bag either. And then when you get to the point where you're like, you know what, I need a towel. Not just a little towel, I need a towel. Then it's super easy to go and buy one, because you will get to that point. Have you also considered an international adapter that works in all countries? They are a little bit bulkier, but if you're planning on going to several countries, it means that you only have to buy one. It was also super helpful when I went home earlier in the year because it meant that I could plug in the things that I brought with me to Australia from the UK, but it also meant that I could plug in the electronics I've bought since moving to Australia. Another little thing, especially if you are planning on staying in hostels, is just getting a little padlock, because then you can lock up your little cubby hole that you'll have just in case. I always try to think of the best of people, but sometimes people. Something that you'll want to bring as well that I did not bring enough of is warm clothing.
But Imogen, it's Australia. It's always hot there.
I thought that too, and I was wrong. Turns out Australia can get cold. When we stayed in Melbourne, I had to go out and buy joggers because I was so cold. I actually have had to buy a puffer jacket. Even in Queensland, which is the sunshine state, in winter, in the evenings and in the mornings, guess what? Kind of cold. You will also want a waterproof. And if you're in Queensland, you'll actually want this more for the summer than you do for the winter, because during the day it will get so hot and humid, and then in the evening it'll piss it down. And if you're thinking about bringing like a DS, a Switch, some form of handheld device, your Kindle,
do it.
Even if you're flying and you're not driving, interstate flights can be quite long. But if you are driving, you will have, you know, some places that are beautiful, and you're driving through and you don't want to look at your phone and you don't want to play Pokemon because it's all so beautiful. But then you'll get to the middle of fucking nowhere, and for hours all you will see are trees. And you might start to question if you're going around in circles, because it just looks the same for hours. Obviously, this is if you were driving with another person in the car. Do not drive in Pokemon. Another thing that I didn't know about until coming to Australia is Medicare. Medicare is kind of like the NHS, and if you're from the UK, you get reciprocal Medicare, but you need a lot of paperwork. So obviously you will need your passport. If you've got them, you'll need some bank statements to prove who you are. Another great thing to have is called the GHIC, which kind of just proves that you are covered under the NHS and that you can get reciprocal Medicare. And make sure that you do this obviously a little bit before coming to Australia, because you will need to get it posted out to you. You'll have to have it posted to your registered address in the UK, and it will come as a card. So obviously just making sure you have that before coming out here makes getting Medicare way easier. The last thing that I didn't actually really think about before coming out here was driving in Australia. So me and my partner had already planned to buy a car together when we got here for traveling, because it would be cheaper than constantly flying and then having to pay for travel, paying for the Greyhound bus, all these kind of things. But I didn't even think about, can I use my driving license here? Yeah, you can. It's fine. Not all countries can, so you need to double check. UK can, not sure about everywhere else. But the next thing is, cars here are expensive, and I'm talking about like 1.5 to like double the cost of buying a second-hand car in the UK, even if you're just looking for something old on Marketplace. There is a redeeming factor that petrol is so much cheaper here. When looking at cars though, do bear in mind that most people here drive automatic cars. Coming from the UK at first, I was like, ew, automatic. Disgusting. When you have been driving for 7 hours and you still have 3 hours to go, you will thank yourself for buying that automatic car. Well, I hope that has helped with making any decisions before you go traveling. If you have traveled Australia and you can think of any tips that I haven't said, then leave them in the comments for other people. Let's all help each other, and I will see you in the next one.